Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting the Carbon Trust to present today. I work in the Innovations Department at Carbon Trust, and this department has been looking at different technologies for the last 13 years since the Carbon Trust was established. Back in 2008, the Carbon Trust did a deep dive into the industry of offshore wind, and from that has started working a lot in offshore wind and has built a research program called the Offshore Wind Accelerator, which is where I work. Since then, we've also started to do work internationally in Japan and China and other European countries. Today, however, I'm happy to be in Aberdeen, and my presentation will be focusing on the potential cost reductions for offshore wind in the UK. The Crown Estate estimates that the levelized cost of energy for offshore wind for a typical site is around 140 megawatt hours for round 2 sites and about 144 for round 3 sites, which is split across a few key cost buckets such as O&M, turbines, foundations, installation, grid, etc. The government rightly believes that costs can be reduced across many of these areas, and thus has put a challenge to the industry to reduce costs to £100 per megawatt hour by 2020. The key factor in achieving this is innovation and scale, which we at Carbon Trust believe are required to bring the cost of energy down to this level. So as I'm sure you've all heard quite a few times, there is an urgency in bringing down costs. We're not bringing them down quickly enough to meet this challenge. The EMR process has reduced market certainty in offshore wind, which has resulted in delays to investment decisions about future wind projects. This has had the undesirable impact of fewer projects being built before 2020. And this means that there's fewer opportunities to try new innovations. It means that there's fewer developers with portfolios of projects who could benefit from investing in cost reduction. So there's reduced incentive to invest. Fewer projects means a smaller market for suppliers, and hence reduced investment in the supply chain. And finally, less scale will mean higher costs. There's another potential consequence of this, is that it might have implications for the UK looking like a less attractive market for investment, which is really going to make it harder for the supply chain everywhere to develop. The effect of this uncertainty has also been compounded by other challenges facing the market, such as a number of energy companies achieving or having declining credit ratings as their profitability was reduced by legislation to turn off nuclear power stations in Germany, and by cheap coal that has made CCGT unprofitable. The impact of this was to reduce potential investments in offshore wind, and that's not mentioning all other issues, such as some of the problems with getting the Aberdeen Bay wind project consenting through. But now both the strike prices and the feeder projects have been announced, and so the market is starting to move again. There's clear guidance on local contents, which should help the UK supply chain develop. But I think in addition to these kind of external factors, the offshore wind industry is still faced with two intrinsic challenges, which are the rising capital costs of projects and increased site complexity in the offshore wind projects that are going to be built in the next decade. So in the early 2000s, the perception of offshore wind as a growth market attracted strong competition and aggressive pricing. In the kind of mid to late 2000s, prices started to increase as suppliers focused on the onshore market, resulting in limited turbine competition and clashes with other industries for installation vessels and specialized components. Further price increases were attributed to increased material costs, which were exacerbated by site complexity, requiring more robust foundation designs, complex installation processes, and calculated O&M strategies. The second challenge is related to site conditions and the sensitivity that offshore wind has. These are estimates out to 2019, but even at that point, you can see the costs of projects are roughly 6% higher for round 3 projects than for round 2 projects. And although offshore wind is less sensitive to site conditions than onshore wind, for example, according to these DEC estimates, we can still see variation of about 30 pounds per megawatt hour for round 2 and about 35 for round 3. So now that I've painted a dismal picture, I should probably flip my presentation and talk about what we can do. So I think that the things that we need to do to meet this cost challenge are to ensure that there's a strong pipeline of projects. That's very important for the supply chain to develop, and these two things are critical if innovation is going to be commercialized so that we can unlock the value from the innovation in the market. So my first one is the pipeline. The UK today has just short of 4 gigawatts built offshore and a further 1.5 gigawatts under construction. In addition, a further 3.2 gigawatts has been issued with CFDs, and there's a high chance that the 2.8 gigawatts of projects with consent without CFDs will also get built by 2020. So based on this kind of assessment, it's probably reasonable that we could have 11 gigawatts installed by 2020. This does fall short of DEC's plans for closer to the high end of 18 gigawatts, as originally stated in the National Renewable Energy Action Plan, but that this may still be an adequate pipeline. Up until now, offshore wind farms have largely used products adapted from applications in other fields. So, for example, marinized onshore wind turbines and foundations designed using oil and gas industry standards. Similarly, the supply chain that serves offshore wind farms is immature and operates on a project-by-project basis. Moving to projects specially designed for offshore wind and industrializing the supply chain provides a large number of opportunities to reduce capital and operating costs. So some examples of this are greater competition for turbines and substructures and installation, economies of scale that will result in productivity improvements, mass production, and standardization. There's also been some estimates on the impact that innovation could have. So innovation at a large scale could deliver between 25 and 34% in cost reductions, which, based on my initial slide of 140 pounds per megawatt hour, could bring us closer to the 100 pounds per megawatt hour range that we're aiming for. But so where these innovations come from, I think that they'll come from the supply chain, they'll come from developers and operators. They probably will come from some government programs, and they may even come from industries outside of the offshore wind industry. But we need to act fast if we want to get the right technologies to market. Depending on the technology, you may need scaled testing, onshore and offshore demonstrations, and all of these de-risking steps take time. But with the right focus on commercialization and the right highest potential innovations, it is still possible to bring significant cost savings by 2020. the probability of achieving these cost savings improves further if there's a strong pipeline of projects. It makes a stronger business case for industry to support innovation, and it creates more opportunity to try a larger breadth of technologies. So one area where innovations are coming from is the Offshore Wind Accelerator program that I'm involved in. This is a joint industry project that involves 9 of the largest developers and operators, and the objective of the program is to achieve cost reduction through commercialization of innovative, low-cost technologies. So we look at 6 key areas in the program, and in the next few slides, I'll just highlight for you a few of the larger projects that we're working on that I believe can really make a step change in the cost of energy. So foundations is a huge focus for us. We ran a competition when we started the program to identify novel foundations, and since then we've worked on a variety of de-risking projects. Where we're at right now is the Keystone Twisted Jacket has been installed with a meteorological mast, and also the Universal Foundation suction bucket jacket has been installed with a meteorological mast. The next step in their path to commercialization is demonstration with the turbine, and so this is the next project that we're hoping to kick off in this area for these 2 innovations. We have awarded our first contract to do a full-scale demonstration of a suction bucket jacket, and this is going to be hosted by Dong Energy and should be installed this year. Another very important project we're working on is the PISA project. This project should look at the standards that are used for monopiles, which could allow monopiles to be used in a wider range of conditions. We are just concluding a measurement campaign at Rodsand 2, where we've been capturing wind measurements that should allow us to better understand the physics of the wind and to validate the models and improve upon the models that are used for capturing wake and calculating energy production. Floating Lidar is another project we've been working on for the last few years. This project can have a lot of impact during the development phases. A rough cost of installing a meteorological mast to capture your wind speeds during the development of a project could be £10 million. Floating Lidar offers a faster solution that could be a tenth of that cost. So we've been working with this technology and also with Banks engineers to try to understand what they need for evidence in order to accept this as a bankable source of measurements. Another area that will have a huge impact, I believe, is the environmental area, and we're looking at consenting risks that can cause delays in projects, and we're trying to understand more about bird migratory patterns, sea mammals, noise mitigation, and these are all of the partners that we have in this project. So it really does reach a lot of the industry. So I think we are seeing a lot of encouraging signs from the market. Siemens has announced that they're going to be manufacturing in Hull. SSE's Hunterston onshore demonstration site for Siemens and Mitsubishi turbines is another important project. The Mitsubishi Vestas joint venture has provided some financial stability to the very promising Vestas V164 turbine, and some other interesting potential for the Mitsubishi turbine. I think Dong's willingness to adopt the larger Siemens and Vestas machines in their new projects. Samsung is demonstrating a 7-megawatt turbine, and I think with a lot of these projects, collaboration between players across the market and sharing of information, such as some of the projects that I mentioned, but others that are happening across the UK and Europe. These are all very important collaborations to bringing down the cost of energy and learning from each other. So I guess in conclusion, I think £100 per megawatt is an extremely challenging target for offshore wind. I think that innovations require a stable incentive regime to spur investment and drive down costs. So hopefully we're entering that phase now. I think ultimately our ability to achieve this will depend on innovation and having the scale and investment to drive down the costs. I think it remains to be seen whether the volume in the UK, Germany, France, Netherlands, and Denmark is sufficient to do this. But the outlook in the UK has improved significantly in the last half of a year, and I think that it is possible with the industry working together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Breanne.